Hi folks, hope you're okay today. This is Jason and love to everybody out there. I want to just share with you about the philosophy of testimony. Before I do, my website is jasonburnspreacher.com, jasonburnspreacher.com, Burns Preacher. And I want to talk about testimony. Be with you. Thanks for listening to this video. If you turn to Luke chapter 1, even as they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. Few pointers on this issue of testimony. It's when I'm on the streets doing street preaching, an argument, a historical argument, it's based on been done in the last few years on testimony. Testimony in relation to the ancient world and how the ancient world is based on testimony. So it's important about testimony because our faith in the Gospels counts. Is give you a look at what the scholarship is in the philosophical world and in the academic world, in science, concerning the understanding of testimony. To give you my own response. Now, my sources. If you look at Richard Dawkins, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, in his lectures on historiography and his papers, the recent scholarship on eyewitness material in terms of psychology and eyewitnesses, etc. A different opinion, if you look at Bart Ehrman's book, Jesus Before the Gospels, he writes a lot about testimony there, psychology there, and he takes a very skeptical. Also, a scholar called Dale Allison, the seminary, has written books on this topic about eyewitness testimony. So you've got three shades, three different opinions about this topic there for you to look at. From a theological point of view, psychology, what current psychologists and anthropologists say. Then, the Stanford Encyclopedia, and look at testimony, the philosophy of testimony, and will give you a brief outline of the implications of testimony to engage with that article. It's a very helpful introduction to the topic. At the moment, I'm reading a PhD called, I think it's Stephen Wright or Dr. Wright, not N.T. Wright, but a guy called Wright, PhD at the moment, and there's another guy's PhD that I'm reading, testimony. So here's what the philosophers say. Simplistic view, I'm not giving you the more complex. And then scientific view of testimony. The current scientific view of testimony is generally, testimony is reliable generally on the big issues. Minutiae issues, often testimony gets it wrong. Philosophy, the general view in philosophy, generally there are different camps, but generally testimony is not a good basis for knowledge. I'm woefully guilty of making a complex issue in science and philosophy simple. The simple bare fact of the matter is, in philosophy, is not valued as a source epistemically in epistemology. Really very good. There's no grounds or much grounds for justification of belief, that you can give a justification for your beliefs on testimony. There's a general skepticism about the reliability of testimony. Getting to the bottom of it and getting to the grips of what is actually being said, there is this core. Generally, it does give you the big picture if you get testimony, a big picture. Now, within that, of thought on different camps in the academic world, apologists and psychologists that have done studies. Remember, in that scientific thing, is often these are very tenuous. They're done. They're not done often in real life. The researchers taking the research to point to a particular theory that they have. It's not an unfair criticism, it's a fair criticism. So a lot of this stuff that comes out about testimony is tenuous. So a lot of it you can take with a pinch of salt. A lot of critical reflection, you'll be able to break down a lot of these claims. On the scientific side, there are nuances within the scientific side. For example, when we're talking about testimony, there are all sorts of nuances. Testimony, individual testimony, testimony for the courts, in practical everyday life, testimony under stress, testimony under grief. When we talk about testimony, we have to be careful of making it too simplistic. There's a lot of complex variants we have to look at and study. Testimony is not reliable, so why use it as an argument for the Gospels? From a scientific point of view, what you can say is, well, actually, it's a very complex subject that you're talking about, and it's very nuanced. And testimony for someone who's in grief, and you're more likely to believe, you're more likely to remember something in your testimony on the day you got married than say just an ordinary day you've seen a car crash. Meaningful and important to you concerning your marriage. So there's issues like that. There's issues about grief, issues about the state of the mind of the person giving the testimony, memory, and how good memories are. There are issues about modern culture and culture that are not modern, and is the ratio of memory testimony the same in a non-modern culture as in a modern culture, and that there is no difference, and that is the testimony and memory are not very good, whether it be in non-cultures or very modern cultures. And this is what the academic world psychology discuss and where they're at. And then you've got to be careful, because when they talk about anthropological non-modern cultures of today, they only say that they are representative of, say, the first century culture. In the area of philosophy, it said that, so that's the scientific side. What the scientific side of testimony is saying, but then I'm giving you some tools to break it down and to actually use it as a defense to defend the Gospels. That you can actually take it and extract something, defend the Gospels from all that. And I'm giving you 3 sources to go and study: Dale Ellison and Bart Ehrman. And then I would encourage you, sources, the books that they're quoting, the anthropologists and psychologists. And this is what's important, is whichever camp, misrepresent the field. So you've got to go and do your own research. You've got to go and on books. I mean, for example, Bart Ehrman is misrepresenting the field because he's only cherry picking that he wants. Balcom, who I really love and I like in a lot of ways, not every way, side in some things, but he's cherry picking. Do your own studies, your own research, and look at things in terms of psychology. And there's a lot of stuff out there. But what I'm giving you is a few tools and the pointers to show that if you enter the field and the complexity of it, so I'm giving you some ways to break down, just to get out of the maze and to get back to some firm ground on it. For example, the maze, the studies often are not as accurate as they're presented. Theologians often only cherry pick the bits that they want, whether it's on the left, liberals, or conservative. Thirdly, in today, non-modern cultures and modern cultures representative of the first century, that's a different culture. Scientific studies and anthropological studies have to be in that cultural context. You can't just technology today and then read it back into the first century. That's not a wise thing to do. Ways to deconstruct this modern scholarship in science. Another example is, I think Don has said that the culture of the first century in Judaism was oral. The two went together. There was oral historical history that was verbal, and how does that, when we talk about testimony? The other thing about the scientific issue is it doesn't take into question ethics and how that relates to testimony. There's very little study in the academic world, in science and in philosophy, how ethics and testimony, that's another whole area that is an area that has not been explored in the academic world. It's not been thorough. There are some philosophers and thinkers that have done it. The Western scholars in the world extremely weak philosophy of testimony in relation to ethics, and how does that impact? So the philosophy of testimony, and the philosophy of testimony is seen not as important knowledge. The idea is that you cannot know verification or justification, and I think that that there are lots of complex debates about internalism and externalism, verifying your beliefs. These are like philosophical terms. Something internal, is there something within us that is a given, that as human beings, like an internal consistency within human beings? Are we to be giving testimony, and is it honest testimony? Is it basically internalism is, I think, is the idea that there's some kind of internal to your knowledge. Is it innate? Is there something innate or given justification of knowledge? And I argue that testimony is something kind of innate within human nature. Discard testimony. Speaking, most philosophers objective kind of knowledge. In philosophy, to be having a dialogue within itself, but not interacting as much as it should do with science, ancient history, and with theology. It seems to be at the moment. It seems to be very ghettoized in its own internal critiques and debates, which shows the shallowness of the debate, because philosophy, Western academic philosophy, is not open to new forms of critique. It seems to be happy with its own traditional apparatus, debate and discussion within its own field of. And I don't think that's healthy. I think there has to be a breaking free from that and listening to science and listening to ancient history, Testament, modern philosophy. It says it doesn't look at ethics, doesn't look at science, doesn't look at ethics as much as it should do. Thirdly, I think, I do think that all knowledge at some point is of testimony, and I don't think the philosophers are really taking this and thinking this through properly, that philosophy, all knowledge at some point is based on testimony. All knowledge. Things and human beings have to testify to that knowledge. If you're doing a scientific study, physics or biology or whatever, and you do your research, you've done. So it's based on testimony, and then the other scientists have to look at your testimony, assess it, and test it to see whether your testimony is reality. I think Western philosophy itself by testimony. Actually, not as honest as it to be. Those are my thoughts. So the bottom line is, I think that I'm happy to use the argument for the Gospels is based on testimony, because research shows, generally speaking, that testimony is generally comes to the big picture. Generally, where you can get a lot of thinkers coming to that conclusion. When you start to discuss the issue of ethics and testimony, come out strong there, because these people were honest people. That when it's negative about testimony, honest about the basis of knowledge, which is all testimony. I believe that the Gospels, being eyewitness material, and also the complexity of like grief testimony or occasion, how testimony works in the ancient world. You cannot use modern thinking to try and ancient history. You have to look at ancient history in its own cultural context, and when we do that, our better memories that they did record, as well as then there's to doubt the testimony of. This is my thinking. I'm not saying I've got it all solved. PhDs on the philosophy of testimony, intellectually honest with testimony, and trying to engage with the current scientific thinking on testimony. You want to work with ancient sources, want to look at them and think about them. So I've got a lot of stuff that I want to see, grapple with, work through, but I'm just giving you a few pointers in my own mind of where I'm working towards, what I'm thinking about this issue, why it's important. And I'm not being anti-intellectual, and I'm not being dishonest. field in a fair way. Thank you for listening. Don't forget my website, jasonburnspreacher.com. Take care. God bless you.